Kid brothers and their practical application. I always thought it would be nice to have a kid brother. All I ever had was an older sister who at best wasn't much fun and at worst was dreadful. It is a terrible thing to have a sister who is bigger and stronger than you are. Say you're hanging out in the yard with some of the guys, explaining to them exactly what you'll do to the school bully if he pulls any of that stuff with you. And suddenly, your older sister comes out on the porch and bellows at you to get in the house and help with the dishes. You respond with a cutting remark that gets a chuckle out of the guys. Your sister then bounds off the porch, throws 3 of the guys to the ground, grabs you, twists your arm up between your shoulder blades, and marches you into the house on your tiptoes. That sort of thing can ruin a guy's image. Older sisters can be bad. But suppose you had a kid brother, say about 3 years younger than yourself. Think of the fun you could have with him. You could lock him in the basement, say, and turn off all the lights. And he's down there screaming and yelling and crying, claiming that he just felt an icy hand on his neck. See, he doesn't know it's your icy hand because you sneaked back into the basement and grabbed him by the neck. And sometimes, when there wasn't anything else to do, you could practice your tying up techniques on him. Kids realize early on that when they get to be adults, they'll have to spend a lot of time tying people up. So it's important they get practice. A kid brother would be perfect for this. One of the best things of all you could do with a kid brother would be to say, "Beat it, kid," whenever he tried to hang out with you and the guys. And he would have to beat it, because if he doesn't, he knows you'll lock him in the basement again. You could teach your kid brother all kinds of stuff too, just to help him out. You could teach him how to build a campfire and pitch a tent and bait a hook and make a slingshot or a bow and arrow. Maybe he wouldn't want to learn any of this stuff, but that wouldn't make any difference because he would be smaller than you and you could teach him anyway. What's the use of knowing something if you don't have anybody around to teach it to? Whenever you weren't tying him up or locking him in the basement or teaching him things or telling him to beat it, you could find lots of other uses for a kid brother. You could send him on errands, real or imaginary, play the old snipe trapping trick on him, use him as a test pilot on rafts and go-karts to see if they were safe. Any number of things. I really missed having a kid brother. Several of my friends had kid brothers and more or less took them for granted. I envied them, but never let on. The accepted attitude toward kid brothers was to regard them as a nuisance. I personally felt that my associates never exploited their kid brothers to the full potential, but I didn't feel it would be appropriate for me to offer advice. That would be like a man who had never owned a dog, lecturing his friends on how to train their dogs. Actually, this is a favorite pastime of persons who have never owned a dog, but why put myself in a bad mood by dwelling on it? Many was the time when one of my friends complained that there was nothing to do, that I wanted to suggest we tie up his kid brother in the basement to turn off the lights and listen to him yell, but I never did. It would have been different if I'd had one of my own, so we could have taken turns using each other's kid brothers for a project. You take advantage of a person if you can't return the favor in kind, and that's not right. My friend Wretch Sweeney had 2 kid brothers, Erful and Vermin. Erful was about the right age for a kid brother, 3 years younger than ourselves, and we got quite a bit of use out of him. Vermin was too young and small to be of much value. Besides, he had a runny nose all the time, and it made you sick to look at him, let alone to actually touch him. A runny nose is a great defense mechanism if you're a kid brother. Even now, it turns my stomach just remembering little Vermin. I thought of him as the nose. Erful Sweeney was a chunky towhead, meaning that he had a head that looked like a toe. I don't know if he was born that way or whether Wretch had done the shaping on the kid's head after he was older. To call Erfel homely was to flatter him extravagantly. As a kid brother, Erfel seemed just about perfect to me, but Wretch regarded him as a large fat tick embedded in his life. Throughout my youthful association with Wretch, Erfel stands out in my memory as a constant lurking presence. In the early years, at least, he had a low whining threshold, which could get on a person's nerves. Wretch and I would be out in the barn shooting baskets in the hay mow, and there would be this background sound of Erfel whining, "Come on, you guys, let me play. If you don't, I'm going to tell." This was Erfel's power whine. "I'm going to tell." Sometimes it would make me laugh right out loud. It was so ludicrous. Wretch was usually in such big-time trouble with his folks that Erfel's telling on him for not letting him play was like giving a parking ticket to John Dillinger. "Beat it, kid," Wretch would say, "before I tie you up in the basement and turn off the lights." "Hey, good idea," I'd say. "I'll tell," Erfel would whine. Erfel had a face that only a mother could love, and I don't think his mother cared all that much for it. She seemed always trying to get his face out of the house. "Where are you boys going now?" she demanded of us one day. "Down to the river, fishing," Wretch said. "And I ain't taking Erfel." "You most certainly are taking Erfel. You just wait until he finishes his peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Erfel, hurry up and eat so you can go fishing with Pat and Wretch. Wash your face first." "Oh my God." "Come on, Ma, don't be mean," Wretch said. "Why do you have to take Erfel everywhere?" "Because he's your brother, that's why. Besides, this will give Erfel a chance to use the new fishing pole he got for his birthday." "Yeah," Erfel said, "and my new reel. Wow, wait up, guys, till I go get my new fish pole and reel." Then Berman piped up, wiping his sleeve across his nose. "Can I go fishing with Pat and Wretch too, Ma?" Mrs. Sweeney looked at her youngest son, the nose. "No, you're gag. Too little to go down to the gag river. Then again, gag, maybe not." We went out and got on our bikes. The standard procedure for the older guys was to ride off as fast as possible and leave the kid brother far behind, whining loudly, "Wait up, you're going too fast." We always got a chuckle out of this particular whine, since the kid brother obviously thought we were unaware we were going too fast for him. Once out of sight of our pursuer, we would hide and let him race on by, still howling, "Wait up, guys, you're going too fast," even though we were no longer even in sight. Kid brothers were dumb. On this particular day, Wretch tried to vary his routine a little. Before we rode off from his house, he said to Erfel, "Hey, Erfel, let's run down to the basement a second. I got some candy hidden away down there. Don't that sound good?" "Nah," Erfel said. "You're not getting me down in the basement. Whine, whine." Usually, Erfel wasn't that suspicious. As I told Wretch later, the trick might have worked if he hadn't been holding the length of clothesline rope right out where Erfel could see it. All we could do was ride away from Erfel, hide until he went whining by, and then go off fishing at some remote place along the river where he wasn't likely to find us. In other words, the standard procedure, which was all right, but not nearly so efficient as leaving him tied up in the basement. After we had ditched Erfel, Wretch and I rode up to China Bend, which was good fishing but a little dangerous. The sort of place where you wouldn't want to fall off the bank or jump in and try to net a fish that was too big just to jerk up onto the bank. Oh, if it was a really big fish, of course you would go in, but it was the sort of risk you wouldn't take for anything under 16 inches, particularly with the current as cold and churning as it was now. After a couple of hours, Wretch and I had caught half a dozen smallish trout, nothing to get excited about, and were just enjoying the peace and quiet of the river when all at once Erfel came panting up on his bicycle. "Gee, guys, you lost me," he said. "I guess you wondered what happened to me, but I've been looking all over for you. Bet you thought I went back home." "Yeah, sort of," Wretch said. "When we couldn't find you, we just came up here and started fishing. I said to old Pat here, 'I wonder what became of Erfel.' And Pat said, 'Oh, he probably went home.'" "Nope, I just hunted till I found you. Now I want to try out my new fish pole." "Yeah, well, this isn't a good place to do it," Wretch said. "The bank's starting to cave away, and you might fall in." "Oh, sure, tell me about it," Erfel whined. "You're just trying to get rid of me. I'm going to tell, too." With that, he stepped over to the edge of the bank, which instantly caved in with him. Shrieking, he clawed at the loosening sod around him, his feet already being swept downstream by the greedy current. Ignoring the impulse to laugh at this comical spectacle, I lunged heroically toward the bank, grabbed Erfel by his tow head, and hauled him to safety. Later, I thought how lucky that it had been Erfel the bank had caved in with, and not vermin, because the nose probably would have had to go into the river. In all the excitement, it took us several seconds to realize that Erfel's new fishpole had plopped right into the deepest hole at China Bend. "Well, that was one fishpole that didn't last long," Wretch said. "Goodbye, birthday fishpole. Maybe next birthday you'll get another one, Erfel. That's only a year away. 12 long months that you have to use your old fishpole. Guess you'll pay attention to what I tell you from now on." Erfel emitted a howl of gloom and despair so pitiful that Wretch and I had to laugh. He then got on his bike and pedaled off toward home, sounding like a broken fire siren. "Stupid kid," Wretch said, untying the laces on his shoes. "Serves him right, losing his new fishpole." He pulled his sweatshirt off over his head. "I don't know why my folks bother to keep him around." He undid his belt and stepped out of his pants. "He's just a nuisance." Wretch then dived into the cold, swirling waters of China Bend. On his fourth dive, Wretch finally found the fishing pole and swam downstream to a place where he could claw his way up the bank. He was blue and shivering. He tossed the fish pole on the ground and started putting his pants back on. He didn't say anything for a while because he was so embarrassed, and also because his teeth were chattering so hard I wouldn't have been able to understand him anyway. After a bit, he said sheepishly, "I hope you won't tell the guys about this. You know, about me going in the river after Erfel's fishpole. It was all I got for his birthday, and—" "Not me," I said. "I'm not going to tell anybody about it." And I didn't. When you see a character flaw of that magnitude suddenly revealed in your best friend, you're certainly not about to spread it around. The fried flies, please, and easy on the garlic. For some reason, I've never been able to comprehend. I sometimes find myself at dinner parties. Startled, I look around and discover that I am seated at a large table with 11 people I've never seen before in my life. This reminds me that I really should pay more attention to where I am going and what I am doing. My goodness, What would I do if I suddenly awoke and found myself in bed with a perfect stranger? With my luck, it would probably be an imperfect stranger, some grizzled, wild-eyed old coot demanding that I check the jug to see if there's another shot of wine left in it. Still, that would be better than finding myself at dinner parties. Sooner or later, usually sooner, at these dinner parties, the host or hostess will announce, "Mr. McManus hunts, you know." A frigid silence falls over the table, like a frozen mute butler, only breaking less china. Soup spoons hang suspended over the vichyssoise. "Indeed," exclaims a stout matron, sighting down her nose at me. "Don't start, Martha," mutters a little bald man seated across from her. Martha starts. "I do hope you won't take offense, Mr. McGinnis, but I view hunters as the lowest form of life, not excluding bacteria and algae." "No offense taken," I reply, glad for an excuse to ignore my vichyssoise, which I view as the lowest form of food, not excluding lichens and boiled beets. "I would venture a guess," rumbles a rotund chap, dabbing the corners of his prissy lips with a napkin, "that over a lifetime a hunter such as yourself probably has killed dozens of defenseless deer and elk." "Thank you," I say, politely dabbing vichyssoise off my tongue with my napkin. His estimate is a bit large, but since my hunting companions aren't around to burst into raucous laughter, I let it ride. Martha now leans forward, her eyes hard and gleaming with anticipation of closing in for the, kill. "So tell me, Mr. McGillis, and I'm sure all those present will be as interested as I in your response, what is it about killing poor wild creatures that gives you so much sadistic pleasure and satisfaction?" "Gee, I don't know," I say. "I've always enjoyed killing things. I haven't thought much about it. All I know is something sets me off and I suddenly have to start killing. One of the things that sets me off is vichyssoise, so I'm sure you'll pardon me if I don't eat any more of it, delicious as it is." I feint playfully at Martha with my butter knife. "Well," she huffs, "I would certainly never have anything to do with killing." The main course arrives. "Oh," cries Martha, "rack of lamb, one of my favorites." "I'm afraid I'll have to pass," I say. I try to avoid eating anything that died of natural causes. Smells good, though. Is there any chance this lamb could have died in an accident? In truth, I've never cared much for killing. There are exceptions. I enjoy killing a big fat housefly that keeps buzzing around my head at night when I'm in bed trying to sleep or read. I leap out of bed, roll up a magazine, and take off after him, trying for wing shots, knocking over lamps and chairs, smashing plaster off the walls, lunging, leaping, diving, trying to get in a mortal wound on my adversary, by which I mean turning him into an amorphous blotch. My wife says she really hates the maniacal laugh that bursts from my drooling and panting lips when I have at last dispatched the cursed fly. She doesn't much like hearing the details of my fly hunting technique either, such as how you have to lead behind a resting fly to get him. On the other hand, I don't enjoy killing flies that aren't bothering me, flies that are going about on their own business, which seems to consist largely of walking up and down windows. I had a hard day at the office, Maggot. I must have walked up and down that window 80 times, and I'm still not done. Most people, including anti-hunters, think nothing of killing flies. I think about it. Sometimes my wife says to me, "What are you thinking about?" I tell her, "Killing flies." She usually doesn't ask me what I'm thinking about for several months afterwards, which is good because usually I'm not thinking about anything. It's embarrassing to be caught thinking about nothing. I wonder why people should be so unconcerned about killing a fly and go berserk over the thought of killing a deer. Is it because flies are more numerous than deer are? It's okay to kill them. Of course, people, too, are more numerous than deer, so we'd best avoid that line of reasoning. Is it because flies aren't as pretty as deer? Most people aren't as pretty as deer either. If we killed things just because they're ugly, my friend Wretch Sweeney would be in big trouble. He wouldn't show his face on the street, I can tell you that. Maybe some people can't stand the thought of killing deer because deer babies are so cute. Fly babies are about as uncute as it is possible to get. Personally, though, I don't think degree of cuteness should be the deciding factor in whether something is okay to kill. Maybe even fly parents think their babies are cute. Then again, probably not. Maybe it's okay to kill flies because they are so small. If a thing is small enough, most people aren't bothered much by killing it, which is why ants, aphids, spiders, and all forms of bacteria get so paranoid. Harry, I tell you, I smell Listerine. The fool is going to kill us with Listerine just because we give him bad breath. I know it, Harry. I tell you, I know it. Maybe intelligence is the determining factor. I knew a professor once who avoided oysters because he said he wouldn't eat anything with that low of an IQ. Flies are pretty smart, though. In my judgment, much smarter than oysters and even deer. I don't mean to imply that they would score well on an SAT test. They can't even divide fractions, a characteristic they share with most college graduates. No, I don't think we should say it's all right to kill something merely because of its low intelligence. If the ugliness faction didn't get Wretch Sweeney, the intelligence faction would. Old Wretch wouldn't be able to step out of his house long enough to snatch the Sunday paper off his porch. Don't get me wrong. I have no desire to be known as the friend of flies. I'm not going to sponsor a program whereby sportsmen's groups go around putting out rotten garbage for flies during hard winters. I certainly prefer deer over flies, and by a substantial margin, if for no other reason than that deer don't play kickball on a manure pile and then walk around on my potato salad before showering. On the other hand, flies don't eat my fruit trees down to the size of fiddlehead ferns. I really don't like killing anything, except fat flies maliciously buzzing my head while I'm trying to sleep. But killing is a natural culmination of the pains and pleasures of the hunt, at least if you're a better shot than I am. Generally speaking, I don't kill anything I don't eat. I draw the line on flies, though. The drumsticks are too small. At loose ends, give a man enough rope and it will still come out 6 inches too short. That is the nature of rope, if not the nature of man. In fact, the phrase enough rope is deceptive because there is no such thing as enough rope. Ask anyone who has tried to tie a canoe securely to the top of his car. No driver is more nervous than the one with a canoe tied to the top of his vehicle. Never mind that he has bought out the entire rope supply of a hardware store, and his canoe now looks as if it had a gill net draped over it. Every time he breaks at an intersection, he expects his canoe to run a red light. This is because the rope turned out to be 6 inches too short. The standard and ideal image of a rope is of a tightly woven strand of fibers of equal diameter its full length. Anyone who associates regularly with rope knows that is not the case. A real rope looks like this. The first 2 feet consist of an unraveled portion of hemp leading up to a big knot whose purpose is to stop the unraveling. The hemp section, approximately 1 inch in diameter, contains 3 other permanent knots of unknown or forgotten function and a permanent loop about the size of a dinner plate. Tied onto the hemp section is a length of semi-rotten clothesline. This in turn joins a stiff blue nylon water skiing rope with the hand grip still attached. The water skiing section is tied to a length of twine, which serves as the terminal or tie-down end. This is the rope you use to tie a $1,200 canoe to the top of your car. It is 6 inches too short. A thorough knowledge of knots is essential to anyone associating with rope on a regular basis. I learned most of my knot tying during a stint I served as a Cub Scout. Mostly what we did at the Cub Scout meetings was learn to tie knots. True, we were mildly interested in knots, but what we really wanted to learn was how to build fires. No, no, boys, the den mother would say nervously. Tie your knots, and then we'll have cocoa and cookies. Mrs. Slocum herself did not know how to tie knots. If she needed to tie a knot, she hired someone to do it. Our only source of knot tying instruction, therefore, was the Boy Scout handbook. The way you tied a bowline, for example, was to follow this sequence. The rabbit comes out of its hole, goes around the tree, and back into its hole. Then you would pull both ends of the rope tight, and the bowline would disappear. Anytime you wanted a knot that disappeared when tightened, you tied a bowline. It's one of the best knots to know. Our favorite knot was the hangman's. This was one of the few useful knots omitted from the Boy Scout handbook, which is surprising, since the handbook at that time was intended to train youngsters to become adept outdoorsmen. Although the handbook failed to mention it, few things are more annoying to an outdoorsman than when, wet, tired, and hungry, he has to figure out how to tie a hangman's noose after the camp cook has served only boiled beets for dinner. We Cubs fashioned several respectable-looking hangman's knots, much to the dismay of Mrs. Slocum, who always rushed in with cocoa and cookies before we could run any field tests. The woman was all frayed nerves. The most useful knot was the plain old granny, which has a reputation for slipping. The slipping problem can be solved merely by piling one granny on top of another, not unlike a football scrimmage at an old folks' home, until the sheer weight of the knot holds it in place. I personally still favor the granny over all other knots, although for safety's sake, I never tie one that weighs less than half a pound or about the size of your average grapefruit. But my knots stay tied. My old friend Crazy Eddie Molden will sign an affidavit to the truth of this statement. When we were about 10 years old, Eddie, who lived on the farm next to ours, came over to play one day. He said he had strict orders from his mom to be home in an hour, otherwise he would be in big trouble. You can stay longer, I said. Nope, I can't, Crazy Eddie said. Ma cut a switch about 6 feet long and said she'd wear it down to the size of a toothpick on me if I wasn't home by 4 sharp. In that case, I said, let's play tying up. Tying up was one of our favorite games. It consisted of one person tying the other one up and seeing how long it took them to get loose. Okay, I'll go first, Crazy Eddie said. I've been thinking of a new way to tie you up. Ain't no way you're going to get loose unless you beg me to untie you. Eddie used about 40 feet of clothesline rope to tie me up, but came out 6 inches too short. That was why it took me only half an hour to wiggle free. Now it's my turn, I said. Step over here, Eddie. I pointed to a cast iron frame that had formerly served as the base for a wood-burning heater, but had obviously been intended for tying someone up to. I had Eddie lie down in the middle of the frame and tied each of his hands and legs to one of the 4 corners with my compound granny knots. Eddie grunted and struggled, but couldn't get loose. Minutes passed. Eddie got angrier and angrier. This is unfair, he yelled. No, sir, I said. There's nothing in the rules that says you can't use a cast iron frame to tie up with. Actually, the only thing in the rules was that you couldn't tickle a guy or otherwise torment him while he was tied up. Because of that limitation, I became bored watching Eddie trying to get loose. I went into the house and made myself a sandwich. By the time I got back, Eddie was seething with rage. When I get loose, I'm going to break all your arms and legs 3 or 4 times apiece, he yelled. Up to that point, I had been thinking about untying him. Now I saw that would be unwise and a definite threat to my health. 4 o'clock came and went. I began to wish Eddie would get loose on his own, while I stood off at a safe distance, because there was no way for me to untie him without considerable risk to my arms and legs. Time marched on. I got out my jackknife and started whittling sticks to calm my nerves. Okay, I give up, Eddie finally said. Untie me. Promise not to break my arms and legs? Yeah. Uncross your fingers, I said, because that canceled out any promise. Okay. I rushed over and tried to untie the granny knots. They wouldn't come undone. The only thing to do was to cut the rope, which I did. Eddie rubbed the circulation back into his wrists and ankles. Then he leaped up and threw a half Nelson around my neck. You promised, I croaked. I had my toes crossed. At that moment, Eddie's mom came around the corner of the house. She was carrying the 6-foot-long willow switch. You're 2 hours late, young man, she snarled. Now march for home. But, Ma, yelled Eddie. No buts, march. See ya, Eddie, I said. I watched Eddie and his mom cross the field to their house. Every 4 or 5 steps, I would see Eddie bound into the air. A half second or so later, I would hear the sizzle of the switch and Eddie go, yipe! How interesting, I thought. Why shouldn't the sizzle of the switch and the yipe occur at the same time Eddie bounded into the air? While I was contemplating this curiosity with typical scientific detachment, however, my own mother discovered her clothesline had been cut into a dozen pieces. She began casting about for a suitable switch. This in turn reminded me of my plan to join up with the French Foreign Legion, and I immediately set off in search of a recruiting office. The Foreign Legion always had need of recruits who were good at tying up. Tying things now seems to be an activity of the distant past. I remember when store clerks routinely wrapped purchases in paper, zapped some string around them from a big spool, and broke off the end with a flick of the wrist and a crisp, satisfying that signaled the completion of the transaction. Package tying was a craft by which the professional clerk could be recognized. When you got home, all your purchases were neatly wrapped and tied, and you had added to your supply of string for tying up other things around the house. But no more. Now when you get home from shopping, all you have is a plastic bag with your purchases lumped in the bottom of it. No string. If you want string, you have to go out and buy it. It's sad. When I was a boy, entire lives were held together with free string. Now everyone seems to be at loose ends. Perhaps there is no better indication of the demise of tying than the modern pickup truck. Have you recently, by recently I mean the last 30 years, tried to tie anything down in the bed of a pickup? It's impossible. There is nothing to tie to. One of the reasons there is nothing to tie to is that pickup designers have discovered that most people no longer actually carry things in their pickups because the paint might get scratched. I am not of the paint scratch fretting school. I still carry things in the bed of my pickup. The other day, I went out to a junkyard and bought an old refrigerator that I planned to turn into an old refrigerator. I had taken along some rope to tie the refrigerator down in the pickup bed. This is a precaution I take ever since I had a washer-dryer combo topple out of the truck on a steep hill and almost rinsed the spin dry on a jogger. The only way I could tie the old refrigerator down was to wrap the rope all the way around under the body of the pickup and up the other side, where it turned out to be 6 inches too short. You don't have enough rope, the junk man said. What's new? I said. There's no such thing as enough rope. True, he said, for he was a man who knew rope. I guess I'll have to sell you some baling wire to finish the job. Baling wire? I exclaimed. That's wonderful. I haven't come across any baling wire in years. Know why? It's an antique now? A collector's item? You got it, pal. But I can't let you have a couple of pieces. But I can let you have a couple of pieces for, oh, say, $5. Try saying 50 cents. Fifth. Guess I can't say it. I can say $2, though. Sold. Naturally, I couldn't use a valuable antique to tie down an old refrigerator, so I made do with what was handy. You don't really need to wear a belt and shoestrings while you're driving. On the other hand, I now wish I had just cinched up the buckle and not added a granny knot. It looks odd with a 3-piece suit.